with you. So please don't think that I have all the knowledge. I'm going to share what I know, but from time to time, as part of our presentation today, I will be asking for your input. I'll be asking you to contribute. There is a platform which I would use. We call it Mentimeter. I'm sure most of us are familiar with it. I'm going to be opening a Mentimeter page where we can put our thoughts and create knowledge together. And at the end of today, I would send not only the slides from today's presentation, I will also send the discussions that we have on Mentimeter. As much as possible, I would like us to put things over there so that we can create that knowledge and we can share with ourselves. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and I want to confirm if everybody can see it. Please confirm if you can see my screen. Let me see. Yes, thank you very much. We can DR. What is DR? I guess maybe I'm a bit too old. So, somebody sent me VN the other day and told me VN is voice notes. DR. I hope DR doesn't mean you can see my notes. Provided you can see the screen, then that's fine. Great. All right, so we're talking about driving organizational culture transformation in a multinational enterprise. Today's session is for 2 hours, and there is so much to say about culture that, of course, as you can imagine, 2 hours will not be enough for us to cover it. And let me apologize in advance because I'll be going very fast, but I would ask you to please, if you have any burning questions, you can pause me and ask. But if it is something that you would like to, that doesn't really disturb the acquisition of knowledge on your part, I would plead with you to keep it until the end of the session so that we can take comments, or we'll have periodic breaks where we can take comments and questions. And that said, I would also want to ask you, in the spirit of proper learning, that 5 minutes to the hour, first 5 minutes to 7 o'clock Nigeria time, we will take a 5-minute break. We will take a 5-minute break so that we can refresh our brains. So DR is doctor. Thank you very much. So 5 minutes to the hour, we will take a 5-minute break. And I would appreciate if one of the organizers could please help to prompt me. So we can just have a 5-minute break, massage our brains, our temples, walk around, drink some water, and then we'll come back. So we will walk from now till 6:55, and then we will come back at 7 and go till the end. So if that's okay by you, please let me know. Of course, if we get to 6:55 and perhaps we still feel we should continue, then we can. But I would like to plead for some time for break, not for me, but for everybody else on the call. So this is me, and Dr. Ogo has already done the privilege of introducing me in detail. My organization used to be known as Hofstede Insights. It's still our registered name and our proprietary brand. But of recent, we've been listening to our clients, and they've told us several times that the name Hofstede, as big as his work has been, and he's still our founder and our revered founder. Oh, great. Yes, but the presentation will be for 90 minutes. So instead, 45 minutes to the close of the time, we will take a short break, and then we will come back. Thank you, Dr. Ogun. So people have told us that the name Hofstede, even though they know him and they respect him, that the new generation of HR practitioners and professionals are not quite familiar with him. So they tend to confuse what we do. So recently, after some deep consultation, we've decided that our new name will be the Culture Factor Group. This actually happened this week. This is the first public interaction I'm having in the name of the Culture Factor Group rather than Hofstede Insights. So it's such an honor to do this here. And in terms of what we do, it's all around culture. We focus on organizational culture, which is to help organizations get the best culture to enable them to perform. Intercultural management, when you have people from different countries working together, multinationals, how do you get them to understand each other and still work with the organizational culture? And consumer culture intelligence, where you're going to now start thinking about how do you take your product into a new environment, considering the culture of that environment. We do a lot of research, training, and analysis behind that. Over 5,000 organizations have used our services. In Africa, we are represented in 4 African countries, Ghana, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Kenya by our partners, but our regional office is here in Lagos, Nigeria. Over 5,000 organizations have used our services, and we're so proud of them, and we're adding more and more to the list. If you look at that picture carefully, you will see that there are several Nigerian organizations, several African organizations in the mix. So what are we going to do today? Today, at the end of today, I will be a happy man if at the end of today, you will be able to define culture properly. So you have a proper definition of culture, both national culture and organizational culture. You will be able to explain what an MNE, a multinational enterprise, is, because we're talking about driving culture transformation in multinational enterprises, and how do MNEs, that's multinational enterprises, how they differ from domestic organizations. You'll be able to describe the complexities of organizational culture within multinational enterprises, considering the impact of cultural diversity. You'll be able to identify why culture transformation is important in MNEs. You'll be able to outline the unique challenges and barriers that multinationals encounter when they attempt to change their culture. You'll be able to discuss the role that leadership play in driving cultural transformation and fostering cultural intelligence within multinational enterprises. You'll also be able to describe how to sustain culture changes within multinationals, and to also identify ethical dilemmas and dimensions of cultural transformation and how to navigate them. So it's quite a lot that we're going to do today, and we'll touch on as much as we can, and also take comments and questions. We'll have about 30 minutes for comments and questions at the end of the program today. Thank you. So let's go into Mentimeter. I want to tap from this amazing reserve of knowledge that we have in the house today, in the meeting today. I am going to share my screen, and I would like you all to please jump into Mentimeter. And how to get into Mentimeter, ladies and gentlemen, is to either scan what you see on the screen. You can scan what you see on the screen, or you can type menti.com and type 53899485. So either you do that, and if you can either scan what you see on the screen, the QR code, or you can type menti.com, and when you get to menti.com, 53899485. I would like you to please do that very quickly. If you are there, you can hit the like button so that I can know that some people have been able to get into Mentimeter. Are you there? Or are there any challenges? Okay, so you can see it on the screen. Can you see my screen? Are you able to see my screen? You should see my screen. Menti.com, yes, and enter the code, or you simply scan the QR code if you are using a phone. A phone actually might even be quicker, so that you leave your computer on. Your phones might be quicker. So Nuruddin, please, could you look at the screen? You would see the instructions to join. So far, 5 people I see have, oh, great. 6 people are in. I need to see more people. Please give a like, please hit the like button if you are in, so that I can have an idea of how many people are there. Of course, we might not be able to wait for everyone, but I just want to see if as many people as possible can get in. And we're going to start right now. Because of time, we're going to start. Please do this for me. Define culture. Define culture. What is culture? What is culture? Don't worry about the textbook definition. We're here to learn. What does culture mean to you? Maybe that's what I should say. You know, if I asked you to define culture, what would your definition of culture be? What would your definition of culture be? Define culture. In your own words, define culture. Thank you very much. We have one response. It's the way an organization works, or their way of life. The way of life of a group of people. Fantastic. Way of life of a group of people. Culture is the way of life of people, way of life of a group of people, the way an organization works or their way of life. Interesting. Culture is a way of behavior amongst a group of people which emanates from their values and their beliefs. Thank you. Customs or common behaviors of an organization. Thank you. It's the way or manner that we do things, the way we do things. Culture refers to shared values, beliefs, processes, procedures in an organization. Behaviors that characterize societies, organizations, communities, nations. Interesting. People's way of life, total way of life of a group of people, a way of behavior of a group of people, a way of life, a way of behavior. It encompasses nuances, language, and perception. It's who we are and how we do things. It's a way of life. The way of life in an organization, behavior of a certain persons, culture is the behavior of employees in an organization, accepted behaviors at work. I'm going to give 1 minute more so that we can answer questions. I'm just going to give 1 more minute, and the reason is because of time, so that we can quickly round up. So if you want to make a contribution, this is the time to make your contribution. If you want to make a contribution, do it now. Right? So let's go on. Culture is a way of behavior amongst people, customs, way of life, how we do things, shared beliefs. Beliefs that characterize our behavior, way of life. We've read all of these. Let's keep going to the ones that we haven't read. Accepted behaviors at work, how we behave. Way of life, how we do things. Belief of a group of people, shared values, customs, the way we live and behave. The outcome of how an organization functions is a result of a consistent type of decision taken by leaders in an organization. Thank you for all these amazing definitions. It's the organization's behavior, the general belief and accepted behaviors of a group of people, a pattern of behavior of a set of persons, the belief and practices, values and behavior subscribed to by a group, the common behavior of employees in an organization where no one is watching, pattern of behavior of a group of persons, the shared values attitude that guides people in the workplace. Wow, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for these. Our time is up for the contribution, but I want to just do some sort of analysis to see what our definitions look like. Way of life, 17 responses. Beliefs, 6 responses. Behavior, 5. Organization, of course, in that context. Attitudes, and customs. So those are the key themes that we see in terms of our definitions. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move to the next one. And this one, I'm only going to give you a minute as well. So I need you to type in very quickly, very, very quickly, please. Why is organizational culture important? Why is organizational culture important? If I asked you as a HR practitioner, as an elite HR practitioner, why is organizational culture important? Why are you going for a program on organizational culture? What would you tell me? Sandra Nkiruka, I see your contributions, and Olare Waja and a few other people, I see it in the chat box. Unfortunately, I think I'll be able to download from the chat box, but I would really appreciate if you can still see if you can type it into the Mentimeter. And the reason is because it's easier that way for us to gather the knowledge together and analyze it. So I will appreciate if you can type into Mentimeter. So please go ahead and type it in. It determines the lifespan. Wow, that's very powerful. Culture determines how long the organization will exist for. Wow, thank you. It guides and guards the practices and behavior. It's the way people do things, so it's culture, of course. So it's important. It drives the strategy. It drives strategy. Thank you very much. We have 1 minute to go, so please type in your contributions within 1 minute so that we can have this together. Drives the delivery of the company's strategic objectives. Somebody said it energizes. That it energizes as it creates synergy within the organization. Thank you. Guides the way things are done and helps collaboration in the organization, helps us to establish standards. It's important because there are certain attitudes, values you want to promote or uphold in the organization, or how you want to be seen. It determines the way an organization can achieve their goals. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Very true. To guide employees on how they should behave. Culture drives strategy and growth within the organization. It influences and defines the behavior of people. It drives the purpose of the organization. It sets the tone for what is acceptable or not in the organization. It has a huge impact on the bottom line and the attitude of employees to work. It infuses direction in the organization. Wow. It creates a sense of belonging amongst the employees. It serves as guidelines for organizational operations. Organizational culture is important because it improves the brand identity. It sets the organization apart from each other. It improves engagement in the workplace. It promotes good behaviors and drives performance. It defines how an organization is run because it simply describes how an organization operates. Thank you so much for that. All your contributions are well noted and well appreciated. For those of us who could not make contributions on time, don't worry. We would gather what we have so far. Organizational culture is important because of what? Strategy, behaviors, guidelines, attitudes, collaboration, standards, belonging, purpose, brand identity. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's take one more. One more piece of learning. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to download all of this and send to us. Multinationals versus domestic organizations. What are the differences between them in terms of their challenges, advantages? Are there any advantages multinationals have over domestic organizations or vice versa? Advantages, disadvantages, challenges that multinationals have compared to domestic, or that advantages they have compared to domestic organizations. Yeah, just tell me very quickly if you can. If you compare and contrast, if you want to compare and contrast domestic and multinational organizations. I want to ask everybody, please remember to type in your comments right in Mentimeter. Into Mentimeter so that we can gather the knowledge. I'm not quite sure we might be able to download the chat, but I think maybe the hosts might be able to do that. But in Mentimeter, we can download it as a PDF. Multinationals have global standards that apply in all their locations. Thank you. If I might qualify that, I can say that they try to apply. They try to apply in all their locations, because if you have worked with multinationals, you will notice that sometimes they do have problems in different countries, in different locations. Multinationals have better processes. Domestic organizations struggle with defining processes, especially when they are one-man organizations. Thank you very much for that contribution. And may I use, in the spirit of diversity, equity, and inclusion, instead of one-man organization, we say one-person organization or sole proprietorship. That's just a small joke on the side. Again, I'm going to give 1 minute. Please type in your contributions in 1 minute. I'm sure you're like, I came to learn. Well, this man is putting me under pressure, asking me to give my comment in 1 minute. It's because of time. So you have 1 minute if you want to make a comment. Please type it into the chat box. I will read as many as I can within the 1 minute that we have. And multinationals have standardized set of rules. They have standardized set of rules and policies that is inclusive. They also have good structures. Wow. Or they tend to have good structures. Very true. Indeed, they emphasize their culture over and above strategy or talent. That's interesting. They do that. One of the advantages of multinationals will be the relevance attached to diversity and inclusion. They tend to be more attuned to diversity and inclusion. Thank you very much. Any more? Please type in your contributions. We need more contributions. Global procedures, processes are applied from their headquarters to help set a common standard. Thank you. And there's one more here. Multinationals have a larger scope, customer base, larger scope and customer base, unlike domestic companies. And multinationals, they face higher risk while the risk is lower for domestic. And I will agree with you on that. Dr. NNS Vyas contributed in the chat box, professionally driven to owner driven. I see a few other contributions in the chat box. I really wish you could send them into the Mentimeter. And then there's one more here. Multinationals are built to last, unlike domestic organizations. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for that. I hope you're not too tired, because I'm going to ask you to do one more for me. And all of these things, we're gathering them together. And when I start the presentation proper, we will be referring to what you have said. Again, I'm going to give you 1 minute to tell me, when we're talking about organizational culture specifically now, between multinationals and domestic organizations, do you see any similarities or any notable differences between the cultures of multinationals and domestic organizations? Are there any significant differences? How would you compare and contrast the cultures? Not just multinationals generally now, but the cultures now. Any particular differences that you might notice between the cultures you see in multinationals and the cultures, organizational cultures you see in domestic organization? Please, I would like you to please type on this in Mentimeter. You can see the code is right here on the screen. The code is right here. I can even put it here again, menti.com, and you can just type in the code, please. Cultures of multinationals versus cultures of domestic organizations. Multinationals are more diversity inclined. Domestic organizations are prone to nepotism. That's a big one. That's a big one. That's a big one. I think we need to chew on that for a bit, because it's actually something that we need to consider. More diversity inclined, typically. Domestic organizations tend to be prone to nepotism. That has been, I guess, our experience here in Nigeria for a while. A lot of locally owned organizations tend to be nepotistic in their behaviors. I see Esther Aribi Adewusi typed in the chat box. Esther, if you could help to please put it in the Mentimeter, you can just see it at the top there, menti.com. I'm just going to click it and I'll paste it in the chat box. Please click what you see in the chat box and just go and type it on the Mentimeter. M&E culture, the multinational culture, is more robust and versatile. Please, you have 1 minute as usual to type in your comments. Subjective cultures in locally owned organizations. Multinationals have standardized cultures. Standardized, okay? Standardized. So you tend to see the same culture across. Yeah. So please, in 1 minute, help me with more contributions. I see this one. Multinational culture is more robust and versatile in line with diversity and international borders. Subjective cultures in locally owned organizations. In other words, they do it as they want. But in multinationals, it's standardized. You tend to see them chasing the same targets. Culture. Cultures in multinationals is usually diverse because they have a workforce from different ethnic groups. So diversity is almost forced on them, the multinationals. Whereas in domestic organizations, usually based on the owner's perception, which is often subjective. More discipline and accountability in multinational organizations. A lot of times it is, because they are subjected to a lot of standards and international regulations. Multinational culture is clearly defined against others. So what they're saying here is you can easily describe a multinational culture, unlike the domestic. It's a bit difficult to describe. And the standardization in multinationals, where domestic are haphazard, and then multinationals usually are more pleasant. Interesting. They have more pleasant, they are more pleasant and people-driven. They have a more pleasant and people-driven culture. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for all of this contributions. Like I promised, at the end of our program today, I will download this and send to you through the organizers, so they will get all your contributions that you have made. And towards the end of today, I'm going to be asking you for some more contributions. And of course, we will dig into it. So thank you so much. So we've read through everything that you have said, and let's go through some conceptual foundations to link up what you have said with what we have. Multinational organization is an organization that has operations in more than one country, right? Apart from its home country in other countries. How do they differ? Usually multinationals are larger, and a lot of us said that. They usually have comparative geographic advantage. And what that basically means is that because they are located in different countries, they can distribute the work that they do They can distribute the work that they do across different countries. They can source cassava from Nigeria and source oil from Saudi Arabia and put all of them together and make the Arabic gum in Philippines. They have that geographic advantage. Diversity, like we said, is forced upon the multinationals. They have people from different countries. They just have to be diverse. And multinationals tend to chase international best practices. Usually, they tend to chase international best practices. And there's this prestige that multinationals have. Most of us, okay, let me not say most of us, but I think a lot of us would love to work with a multinational because it's easy to recognize their name and you can easily tell them, this is where I work. I work with Nestle, I work with Unilever. But what are the challenges with multinationals compared to domestics? Multinationals tend to be more complex. And culture clashes, even though they have diversity foisted on them, culture clashes are much more imminent, much more prevalent in multinational organizations. And in some cases, especially in some of the clients we've dealt with, multinational organizations, there are even complaints about things like racism in multinational organizations. And multinational organizations, because they are large and they are complex, decision-making tends to be slower. The employee costs also usually are higher because they have this standardized payment system. And when they get into Nigeria, they will have to make sure that they pay the Nigerians a salary that when the Nigerians hear how much they're earning in France, the Nigerians will not feel too bad. And then there's unfair competition as well. Multinationals, what we mean by that, because they are large with geographic advantages and they also have usually political connections, they tend to take advantage of those things and they make life difficult for domestic organizations. So that's about multinationals and domestics. Let's come into the realm of culture. What is culture? Well, let us first of all analyze human behavior at 3 levels. First of all, there are certain aspects of human behavior that are common to all mankind. All human beings are similar in certain ways. And those things that are common to all mankind, we refer to them as human nature. Good example of human nature is all of us have the capacity to feel sad. Or maybe I will say it this way, all human beings should have the capacity to feel sad. If something bad happens, God forbid, if you lose a loved one, you will feel sad. You will feel sad. If you don't feel sad, then there's possibly, you might have a challenge with your psychological makeup or your psychiatric makeup. There might be a challenge if you have the inability to feel sad when bad things happen, to feel pity, for instance, for people, then of course there might be something wrong there. So we all feel sad as human beings, but then so it comes naturally to all of us. It's our innate nature. But then there are certain things that we learn. Those things that we learn relate to how we, for instance, express ourselves. So we feel sad, but how we express sadness is something that we learn. Some of us are taught not to cry publicly. Yeah, they tell you you're a man. When you're or a woman, as a case, you're grown up. Don't cry publicly. Don't let people see your tears. Some other cultures will tell you no, until you cry and you wail and you roll on the floor, then we don't know that you've actually lost someone. So we all feel sad, but our expression of sadness is something that we learn. That thing that we learn as human beings, we learn from a group so that we can blend into the group. We refer to that as culture. So human nature is what is common to all of us. Culture is what we learn. And we learn culture from a group. And that group can be our nation, our society. That group could be our organization. We learn how to behave. And then there are certain aspects of our behavior that are a combination of what we have inherited and what we have learned. It's sort of like our own personal reaction to human nature that we are born with and the culture that we are existing. And we refer to that as your personality. So your personality, if you are introverted, for instance, your introversion is an expression of yourself, but your introversion is a consequence of what you were born with, perhaps genetically. the introverted gene sneaked from your great grandmother and bypassed your father and your grandfather and your father and entered you, manifested in you. Yeah, you are born with it. But despite the fact that you are prone to introversion, your experience of culture will now define your expression of introversion. Like the joke that they say about Nigerians, that there are no Nigerian introverts, that all Nigerians talk loud and talk fast. Well, it's not true. There are Nigerian introverts, but the Nigerian introverts, the way they express themselves are usually much more rambunctious compared to Tanzanian introverts, for instance. So just to recap that, human nature, culture, personality. This is really important for us to understand, because oftentimes as HR practitioners, you want to deal with an issue and you don't know whether that issue is a personality issue or a culture issue. You need to know that. Somebody might actually have a personality issue and it's not a culture issue in the organization. So it's important to understand that. And one more thing to say about this point is that culture is a shared phenomenon. Culture is a shared phenomenon. So if you're going to go away with anything today, please, next time somebody tells you my culture, tell them, sorry, you do not have a culture, because you as an individual, you are incapable of having a culture. A culture has to be shared. So instead of saying my personal culture, no, you say the culture that I come from. Yes, the culture I come from. So culture is shared. An individual can have a culture. An individual can have a personality. They can't have culture. A group will have culture. Professor Hofstadter defined culture in general as the collective programming of the mind that separates one group of people from another. Collective programming of the mind, which distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from another. Nigerians are programmed in a way different from Ghanaians. And you can almost tell a Nigerian when you meet them compared to the Ghanaian. It's not just the accent, it's the way they talk, the way their body language. You can almost tell if you are very familiar with Nigerians and familiar with Ghanaians. You can almost tell. In the same way, Lagosians are programmed differently from people in Abuja. Yeah. And if you doubt me, just go to Abuja if you're in Lagosian for a while, and you will see how crazy we are in Lagos. With all due respect, I'm in Lagosian. I was born and raised here. So I can tell you, when I go to Abuja, people in Abuja wonder, what part of the world, the planet did you drop from? You know, you're always in a rush, they say to me, usually. Right. When we bring it to the level of organizations, Professor Hofstadter also gave us another definition for culture. He said that organizational culture is the way in which the members of an organization relate to each other, relate to their work and the outside world in comparison to other organizations. If you notice, for this definition, he did not use programming. And the simple reason why he did not use programming is because when you enter into an organization, you are already programmed, my friend. You have been programmed by your family. You have been programmed by your experiences. You are already fully formed when you are joining an organization at age 21. However, despite your programming as an individual, when you get into an organization, you would have to conform, to set your program aside, to join the members of that organization in how they relate to each other, their work on the outside world. And if you're not happy with it, usually what you do is that you leave the organization and you find another one that suits your programming. So it's important for us to know that. When we talk about culture as well, we look at different levels and manifestations of culture, different levels. The most visible part of culture is what we call the symbols. Symbols are the most visible part of culture. And symbols tend to be, whenever people try to do culture change, that's where they start from. And which is good, but sometimes may not be so effective. Symbols relate to things like your national dress, how you dress. Yeah. In the office, like your dress code, your logo, your document formats. In the nation, your flag, your coat of arms, your national dress, your music, your language, and your language that you speak. And then the next level of culture is heroes. Heroes are the people that typify what is good and right, good in inverted commas, what is celebrated in that culture. So if you look at Nigeria, for instance, some of our heroes will be like our founding fathers, Sadana Sokoto, Tafawa Balewa, Azikiwe, Awolowo, or musicians, Fela, King Sunny Ade, Ebenezer Obey, Burna Boy, Davido, actors, Peter Doche, Kanayo, who has now become the symbol of something that I don't want to talk about, which is on the screen. If you get my joke, just type it in the chat box. Heroes, they are heroes. When we say they're heroes, they represent something about our culture. And they can even be fictional, like Papa Ajasko, or Boyalinko, or Aluwe, for those of us who are familiar, or Zebrudiah, or Samenja. And I'm calling names that people will be looking at me, what is Samenja? Who is Samenja? And who is Aluwe? And who is Zebrudiah? Well, if you don't know them, then I don't know. But then they are heroes. They represent a part of your culture. In an organization, the heroes are the star performers and the influential leaders in the organization. These are the elements of culture. These are the elements of culture. And then you come to rituals. Rituals, as the name sounds, are things that you do. They are things that you do. Greetings, ceremonies, day-to-day social interactions in the society, and then in organizations. Louis got it. In the organization, rituals include our emails, meetings, how we hold our meetings. Some organizations, they start their meetings and they start it 5 minutes after the time. So you know that if you're 5 minutes late, you are still on time. Some other organizations, they start their meeting 5 minutes before it starts. So if you're not there 5 minutes before it starts, you're already late. Meetings, handling customers, handling colleagues, appraisals, rewards, sanctions, all of those things are rituals. And then you now have the core of culture, which are values. Now, values are difficult to understand. Values are not good or bad. Values are why you choose to define certain actions as good or bad. Let me say that again. Values are not good or bad. Values are why you feel that something is good or something is bad. Oh. Hello? Do you have a question or somebody mistakenly unmuted their mic? Okay. So values are not good or bad. Values are why you said something is good. Values are what makes you say this is good and this is bad. That's value. No? And those are values. Values are what makes you determine whether some practices are good or bad. Symbols, heroes, and rituals, we refer to them as practices. Symbols, heroes, and rituals, the three of them, those three levels, we refer to them as cultural practices. And then values drive practices. Within organizations, when you talk about organizational culture, we focus on the practices, symbols, heroes, and rituals. But in societies, we focus on values, right? And as an organization, we have two models, and this is what Professor Hofstede bequeathed us, two models for measuring culture. One for measuring national culture, which focuses on measuring cultural values, 6 dimensions. We're not going to talk about it here. We're going to talk about it later today. And then another model for talking about organizational culture, again on 6 values. The 6 values of organizational culture and the 6 values of national culture, they don't meet. And the simple reason is because organizational culture and national culture are 2 separate paradigms. Yeah, they are 2 separate paradigms. And we will talk a bit more about that. National culture gives you an insight into why you feel the way you feel, because it's about values. There's a way Nigerians feel when it comes to money. Yeah? When a Nigerian has worked for you and you have not paid them, there's a way they feel. And usually they will give you their expression. If you want to cheat a Nigerian, there's a way a Nigerian will feel and there's a way a Nigerian will express it. It's something that we have been programmed to do. Now, that's national culture or societal culture, if you want to put it in that way. However, regardless of your national upbringing and your national programming, when you get into an organization, multinational or domestic, There is a company culture, and the company culture is how you should behave, irrespective of your value programming. Let me put it this way. National culture and organizational culture are like water and the land. Yeah. The way you walk on the land is different from the way you walk in water. Yeah. Somebody has asked the question before, which is stronger, national culture or company culture? It depends. So if you take water and the land, which is stronger, a lion or a crocodile? It depends on where the battle is happening. If the battle is happening in the water, the crocodile will be king. If the battle is happening on the land, the lion perhaps might defeat. So national culture, company culture are two different paradigms. Important to note that. National culture, why we feel the way we feel. Organizational culture, how we should behave, irrespective of how we feel. Let me use one more analogy to bring it home. You can think of countries like gardens. Yeah, in a garden, you have different types of flowers in a garden, different types. And you can make a bouquet of flowers using the same type of flower from one garden, or using the same type of flower from different gardens, or using different flowers from one garden, or different flowers from different gardens. Yeah. So gardens are like, nations are like gardens, organizations are like bouquets, but the people that work in those organizations are like flowers. Okay, like I said, you can create a bouquet, create an organization with the same type of flower from one garden. You can look for the same type of person from one country. Or you can use different types of flowers from one garden, the same type of, different types of people from one nation. Or you can have a bouquet that is made up of the same type of flower from different gardens, the same type of human beings from different countries. Or you can have a bouquet that is made up of different types of flowers from different gardens, different types of human beings from different countries. Through diversity, in a sense. It's important to think about that. Gardens, bouquets, and flowers. As I promised, you're going to get the slides, so don't worry about taking screenshots or notes. You will get the slides. How do you find the right blend? It's not enough for you to take best practices of organizational culture as a multinational. Take it from France or from the Netherlands or from the UK and just import it verbatim into Nigeria. It doesn't usually work. You have to look at what is going to be viable within your country. You have to look at what will work in your country. So it's not enough for you to say you are going to get best practices from France or wherever. You have to find that success enabling zone by seeing how to adapt best practices into your local context. Without being too, and I hope nobody will take offense here, when we talk about diversity, for instance, international best practices, put it in inverted commas, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, includes ensuring that you have people of different sexual orientation in the workplace. Anybody who is doing HR in Nigeria knows that you cannot have that conversation in Nigeria about sexual orientation. You can't have that conversation in Nigeria because they're going to come for you. The government is going to come for you. Yeah. So what do we mean? Even though international best practices establish that this. No, when you come to Nigeria, you have to find a way to adapt it to the Nigerian situation. It's important to do that. One more thing I want to say about organizational culture, particularly, is that oftentimes people have an idea of what their culture is. We call it the perceived culture. We call it the perceived culture. Perceived culture. This is what we think our culture is. But then the problem is that usually happens when we go ahead and measure our culture without using the right tools or experts. If you use the right tools or experts, you will not be measuring what you think your culture is. You'll be measuring what your culture really is. What you think your culture is and what your culture really is, they could be different or they could be the same. Right? But the only way to tell what your actual culture is to use a scientifically validated instrument to measure your culture. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. And then there's what we call the desired culture, which is the culture that you would like. And then there's what we call the optimal culture, which is the way that you need to be, the culture that you need. And what are we saying here? Sometimes The culture that you want to have may not be the culture that is strategically viable for you. I'll say that again. The culture that you desire might not be the culture that you need. The culture you need has to be aligned with your strategy, right? So it's important to know that. Simply because our staff want to work from home doesn't necessarily mean that working from home will work for us as an organization. Right? Or if our staff want to come to the office every day, doesn't mean that that will work for us. Because other organizations are doing it, doesn't mean it will work for us as well. Which goes straight to the point I'm trying to make here. There's no good culture, there's no bad culture. What works for them may not work for you. You need to find a culture that aligns with your strategy. Culture and strategy are two sides of the same coin. Culture and strategy, they are two sides of the same coin. You can't create culture. What we mean by that is that once you put people together in an organization, culture begins to form naturally. But as leadership, what you can do is to get into that culture and begin to shape it. To shape it so that that culture can align with your strategy. Culture is no longer fuzzy and as an illusion. It can now be measured. You can measure culture, and I will tell you about some of the measurement techniques for culture. And then when you want to embark on culture transformation, yes, please.
So it's 5 minutes to the top of the hour. Maybe we can take the break.
Yes, please. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you so much for calling my attention. We'll take a 5-minute break, water break as it is, and we'll continue in 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Doc.
So everyone will take a 5 minutes break just to let our brain relax, and then we'll continue at 7 p.m. Thank you.
So we have 1 minute.
No, it's actually 7 p.m. now, so we can go ahead.
Oh, okay, super. I think my clock is a minute late, so my apologies. But I'm here, so we can continue. Thank you very much. Great. We were talking about 4 ways in which organizational culture is different. Just a second, please. Let me deal with this. And we talked about there's no good culture, there's no bad culture. Culture can't be created, culture can be measured, and culture change is gradual. Culture change is gradual. It will take time, especially if you're in a large multinational, it will take time to make culture change happen. So it's not something that will happen in 2 weeks or 2 months or 90 days. Sometimes it happens in 90 days, but usually it doesn't. Well, not 90 days, even a year perhaps, but usually it doesn't. It takes time for culture to form. Organizational culture in multinationals. Multinationals have what we call the double whammy. And what do we mean by the double whammy? First of all, multinationals have national culture implications on account of the fact that they have people from different countries with them. They have national cultural implications. And then they also have the organizational culture issues, aligning their culture to their strategy. In terms of national culture, there are home country culture versus the host country culture. So England versus Nigeria, France versus Cote d'Ivoire. And then you have the individual preferences of the people who are working in that organization as well, including the leaders. And then on the organizational culture side, you have the global strategy, yes, and you have the global multinational culture. But is it really possible to implement it in every country that you are working in? That actually tends to be a big challenge because, like I demonstrated when talking about diversity, certain practices, certain organizational culture practices are a taboo in certain other cultures. So I asked the question there, can a global approach work? For those of us who are not familiar with the term global is a combination of global and local, i.e. blending your global standards, considering how you can ensure that it is viable locally. I see a question about how you can shape cultures. We'll talk about that in a bit. It's important to know that national culture and organizational culture are not the same. We talked about that already. But then there's this other interesting question. Can organizational culture override national culture? Is it possible that I can bring Unilever or whatever to Nigeria and everybody that works in Unilever will be behaving like the Brits, the British people? Is it possible? Well, the simple answer is yes. Organizational culture can override national culture, provided that organization's culture is a strong one. It's a strong one. We're not going to say that you're going to convert the Nigerians into British people, but you can actually constrain the Nigerians to behave, in quote, like the British people in Nigeria working in that organization because you are paying them. But that can only happen if your culture is strong. So it's important to know that. Let's talk about why culture transformation is important. I know you had already done some work in the Mentimeter, so I'm adding my own contributions to what we have done so far. Why is organizational culture imperative for multinationals? Well, these are some statistics that you can see, and statistics, as the numbers don't lie. Yearly, people do research in this area, and everybody says culture is important. In fact, there are about 2.3 million references to culture in leading business publications in 2021 alone. But 84% of organizations say that their culture needs to improve. 84% of organizations. According to some statistics, only 15% of organizational transformation projects actually succeed. Why is cultural transformation important? So many reasons. There are 6 I've identified here, but in our practice, we've identified over 48 business areas that culture transformation impacts. Mergers and acquisitions, your performance as an organization, diversity, equity, inclusion, customer experience, best practices. I mean, the list goes on. Issues like motivation, leadership development, digital transformation, change management, conflict resolution, corporate education, your governance, expatriation, negotiations, technology adoption, your staff's attitude towards rules, teamwork, time management, leadership development, succession planning, winning contracts, all of these things. In fact, we think that every organizational issue has a culture angle to it. Maybe we're fanatics in saying so, but we believe that. And Peter Drucker supports our saying that we say that every organizational issue has a culture leg to it. Yes. Culture will eat your strategy for breakfast. No matter how good your strategy is, if you don't have culture that can support the strategy, your strategy will fail. We look at culture and strategy like two wheels on a bike, on a motorbike, moving your corporate performance forward. Two wheels on a bike, moving your corporate performance forward. Strategy gives you direction. Strategy tells you, okay, this is not working. Let's move in this way. But no matter how good your strategy is, if there is no power behind that strategy, which is culture, the strategy is not going to go anywhere. Those of us who ride motorbikes or who are familiar with motorbikes, we will know that the power of the bike comes from the back wheel. It doesn't come from the front wheel. A bike is not like a car that has front wheel drive, or most bikes, as far as I know. Bikes, their power comes from the back wheel. Right? Culture is the power to move your corporate performance forward. But strategy is the direction in which that culture will take your corporate performance. This is true for multinationals, and it is true for domestic organizations. A lot of organizations spend time building strategy. They don't spend time building culture. The culture is a flat tire, and no wonder their bike is not moving fast enough. They need to get down, fix that flat tire of culture, and ensure that it works. Right? So we're talking about why multinationals should be thinking about culture transformation, why it's important now. Let's look at what is happening in the world today. So many things are happening, yeah? Russia and Ukraine, as if we're not tired of that one. Israel and Palestine, wars. Upon all of that, we're having a lot of environmental issues. Food supply is being threatened with Ukraine and Russia in the war. At war, it affected the grain supplies. It caused food inflation and also caused oil prices to rise. Inflation, every country in the world is experiencing inflation now, and there are even talks of an economic downturn impending. Well, when your environment changes, your strategy has to change. When these headwinds occur, your strategy has to change. And when your strategy changes, your culture has to change. This is why organizational culture transformation is imperative now, both for multinationals and for local organizations as well. When the environment changes, strategy changes. And when strategy changes, culture must also change to align with the strategy, as we have talked about it. So somebody asked a question about how you shape organizational culture. How do you shape organizational culture? Well, you shape organizational culture simply through what we call social control. Social control is how you change culture. You shape culture through social control. Through social control. Social control can be informal or it can be formal. I'll give you an example of informal social control. Please, this one you type in the chat box. Adekola Kemi says, should culture be enforced? We'll talk about that in a way. Or let me just quickly answer that. The enforcement, in quotes, of culture or culture transformation, that in itself is culture. So, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah. Social control. When you travel for maybe a holiday, or you even go for a training and you come back to the office, apart from the knowledge you're bringing from the training, what do your colleagues usually expect from you? Or what do you take to the office with you? Who can type it in the chat box? You travel for a holiday or you go for a training. When you come back on Monday, you resume on Monday in the office. What are people looking, when people are looking at you, what do they expect? Thank you very much, Jane. Chocolates. Everybody expects chocolates. Have you ever wondered where this culture of chocolate, this chocolate culture, have you ever wondered where it came from? Somebody started it somewhere. It did. Well, that is an example of informal social control. So Adekoya, Kemi, this is an example of how culture is enforced. There is soft pressure. No, it's not in the bylaws of the organization. It's not in the employee handbook. It's not in our SOP. It's not in our HR policy. But somehow, everybody gets the message. You bring chocolates. What happens if you don't bring chocolates? Please type in the chat box. If you don't bring chocolate, what happens? Are they going to fire you? They won't fire you, but some things happen. What happens if you don't bring chocolates? Please type in the chat box. I traveled and I came back, no chocolates. Thank you very much. They tease you. They are punishing you. Teasing is a form of social control. They punish you. They will come and say, some people can travel the whole world, though. Even small chocolate, they cannot buy for us. Small chocolate, they can't buy for us. Yeah? So that's informal social control. Trolling, gossip, all of those things happen. And then you have formal social control, which is now things that have been documented in our HR policy, in our staff handbook, we tell you in the rules and regulations, this is how we behave. This is how we behave. So social control is how you build, you shape culture. Right? That's how you shape culture. Thank you very much, Esther. They will call you stingy, Akagon. That you're the only one that will travel to London and come back and not see chocolate to buy for everybody. In fact, I know it was an organization I worked in, a lady that was working in that organization, she forgot to buy chocolate. You know, when she came, she apologized to the staff, say, I'm so sorry, that the chocolate that I bought, that she checked it into her bag, and her bag, they said that something happened, but that she has sent her driver now. The driver has gone to ShopRite. He's going to go and buy chocolate and bring for them. Going to buy their chocolate for them. So informal social control, formal social control. That's how culture change happens. That's how you shape culture change. So in other words, we're saying that if you are changing culture, you are changing behaviors and attitudes. Adekoya Kemi, yes, indeed, it is possible for the handbook to state the company's culture, or better still, we'll say the handbook will state the optimal culture of the organization. It will state expectations, norms and expectations in terms of the culture for the staff. Yes, it is possible for the handbook to do that. You know, for instance, I know of a particular organization which will remain nameless for now, where it is written in their handbook that you cannot raise your voice to a colleague. You cannot raise your voice to a colleague, either a superior or a superior, your peer or your subordinate. You cannot raise your voice. If anybody raises their voice, they will face a disciplinary panel. They say no matter how angry you are, you contain it, you don't raise your voice. Yeah, that's culture. That's culture. So change of culture is a change of behaviors and attitudes. How do you do it in an organization? How do you do this difficult shaping? You can do it indirectly or you can do it directly. Indirect is all the associates. You are changing the environment, expectations and norms. Like I said, you put it in the handbook. These are the changes that we're going to make. And you enforce it through rewards and sanctions. And you also will expect the leaders to exemplify that behavior. And then direct shaping happens with the leaders. This time around, they are going to use the leaders as an example to make culture change happen. You go to the leaders and begin to shape the behavior of the leaders so that the leaders can exemplify the target culture of the organization. You give them personal feedback and guidance so that they can modify their behavior and represent the optimal culture. You will see this shaping happening at different levels. You remember the symbols? Yes. So symbols, behaviors, attitudes, rituals, beliefs, structures and systems, rewards and sanctions, strategies, capabilities, all of these areas, the shaping would happen. But what we say to organizations, ensure that that shaping of culture is deliberate. Because if it is not deliberate, and if it is not knowledge-backed, research-based, data-driven, you are going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem. Yeah. As you're also shaping culture, there are three things that you need to make culture change happen. You need a high level of trust. If there is no trust in the organization, culture is not going to change because people will be paying you eye service. There must be a minimum level of anxiety or nervousness. That is, there must be psychological safety. Otherwise, culture change will not happen. And the last thing is that there must be an urgency, a willingness to change. A willingness to change. This last point in particular, that willingness to change. If you have people in the organization that do not demonstrate a willingness to change, we typically advise that you should out-counsel them. Tell them to leave the organization in a nice way if they have demonstrated consistently that they're not willing to change. And especially when they are senior in the organization, then they become a problem for you. Have you heard some people say the HR has said their own? In this department, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the king of this kingdom. This is how I do things here. Have you ever heard people say that before? Have you heard people say that in your organization? Yes, people do that. Well, not your organization necessarily, but some organizations. They become the king of the operations department or king of IT. They have said their own. They are just, don't mind them. They are just saying their own. They say they call themselves pioneers. Yeah, maybe they've been there for a long time. Yes, that this is how we have been doing it. I don't care what they are saying. They have said that if you like, go and report me. If you like, go and report me. Those people, when they report them, please, let's get them out of the organization if we are serious about culture change. Again, that means that culture change is going to cost us something. You said that the sound volume is low. Can you hear me better now? I'm almost screaming where I am, actually. Am I audible? Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Esther, I think you might want to check your settings. Yes, so please, those people who are going to prevent you from making culture change happen. When you see leaders that don't show a willingness to change, you have to get them out. Otherwise, your culture change, your transformation won't happen. It won't happen. Leaders at different levels, not just at the top. Even those supervisors, those demigods, and what do they call them again? Tin gods, T-I-N gods, tin gods, small God with a small letter G, demigods and tin gods. Get them out. It's going to cost you something, by the way. Culture change will cost us something. Let's talk about the barriers that organizations, particularly multinationals, face in terms of culture change. Multinationals have several issues, but these are some of the most critical ones I've identified. There's this thing about blind effort, complex resistance, politics, poor communication, change fatigue, which survey fatigue is related to, governance, and globalization. Those are the 7 key issues I believe in terms of challenges. And I'm also speaking from experience. Please note that most of these issues also concern domestics. But when it comes to multinationals, particularly, the complex resistance and globalization, they tend to pertain strictly to domestics. Ayomiku says, on what basis do you ask them to leave? And is it legal when you get to the industrial cost? I understand that very true, Ayomiku. But if the leader is working at cross purposes with the organization, do we still say that they are with us? How you do it, of course, you are going to have to be clever about how you do it to make sure that you don't run foul of the law. But essentially, you show the leader clearly that they are not aligned. You are not aligned to our organizational ethos. You're not aligned to our organizational ethos, to the direction. Richard, thank you very much. Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation should give me a job. If it is the chairman of the board of the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, I will gladly accept that. I would. Blind efforts. This is one of the most common issues with many organizations, not just multinationals. Everybody wants to change culture. We just start changing, Sha. Let's start doing something. Let's do something. What do you want us to do? What should we start doing? Oh, yeah, let's start dressing in a particular way. Let's start doing this. Don't do that in culture change. Don't do that. You need to have a proper culture assessment. This is the biggest contributor. This blind effort is the biggest contributor to the failure rate, the high failure rate in culture change. Either we're using poor tools for culture analysis, we're not using experts, or we're not using the right methodology. One of the multinationals I worked with recently, well, not recently because it's been a few years, their problem was that they didn't listen to the experts. In our view, they didn't listen to the experts. The experts told them these are the things you should change. And they said, no. What do you do? So blind efforts, we want to change, but we want to change on our own terms. That's not the right way to go about change. Complex resistance happens in multinationals particularly. In organizations, in all organizations, there's resistance, but in multinationals, resistance is complex. Why is it complex? You have multiple stakeholder groups, multiple interests, different levels. Your consultation is going to be wide. In fact, you have to hire somebody to do consultation on the culture front alone. Right? As you know, resistance to change usually arises from fear of the unknown. People are usually scared about their jobs. And if there's not enough communication around that change, it's going to create that. So complex resistance is an issue. Politics, particularly in multinationals, in all organizations, there are politics. Even in the one that you are talking about, thank you very much, Adekoya. We're on the same page. There's politics everywhere. Even in the organization you work in, I guarantee you there's politics there. There's politics. In fact, a proper MBA program will teach you how to play office politics. By the way, politics basically is about getting people to do things. It's the other side of leadership. It's the other side of leadership. Office politics is prevalent in multinationals, and it is because multinationals have complex ownership structures, complex governance structures. They have other structural complexities in terms of matrix and line reporting, dotted line reporting, direct reports, and all of that. Very, very complex in multinationals. If you've worked in them, you know exactly what I mean. In multinationals, you tend to see alliances, enemies in quotes, and alliances, and frenemies, as they call them. We're enemies today, friends tomorrow. You tend to see those things happen a lot because of their size and their complexities. And so you tend to see that culture change will be either supported or resisted based on this. Some clever multinationals, what they do is that when they want to start change, they will hire consultants, but then they begin to identify those people who are popular in the organization, those informal leaders, and inculcate them into the change process so that they can win people's support and drive change. You cannot over-communicate in doing a culture transformation. You can't over-communicate. And multinationals, yes, they tend to have highly qualified communications experts, but oftentimes you tend to see that could also be a barrier because they still are unable to communicate enough to do culture change well. So if you don't communicate well, then you're going to create resistance in the organization. Change fatigue is something that we have seen very commonly with a lot of multinationals. And this is because they tend to do so many initiatives. People told me that this quarter alone, I have filled 6 surveys. This quarter, only me, 6 surveys. Only me this quarter, I've filled 6 surveys. Like, how many surveys am I going to fill in a year? I understand that. And sometimes when we are trying to do so many things, we now start seeing that the efforts are cannibalized. One of our clients, a multinational as well, recently told us that they are doing digital transformation and they want to do culture transformation, and they're also doing another transformation in something else. And I'm like, why don't we put all of these projects together and make it one project? Let's harmonize this. Get the consultants together into a room. Let's discuss it and let's see how do we make this happen. And I also told them humbly that it's also possible that you don't need me now. Maybe you want to do your digital transformation first, and then you can now call us in after a year or 2 to come and help you with culture change. It's difficult for me to say that as a business leader, but I have to be honest because I know that will create problems for me. We've already talked about governance challenges because multinationals are complex. They have, in some cases, convoluted or artificial governance structures, and because of that, you have the ownership of the change and the leadership of the change is fragmented. It's not clear. And accountability sometimes, and I will show you one of the reasons why in a few slides, why accountability sometimes tends to be a problem in some of these organizations. And it's because they tend to pursue, in some cases, they tend to pursue conciliative change, what I call conciliative change, and we'll see that in a bit. And that creates a bit of a problem for us. We'll talk about localization, of course. When you're talking about culture change, are we going to have the same culture across all our entities? Or are we going to have different cultures in Nigeria? Or are we going to be in some areas the same and in some areas different? And if we're going to be different in some areas and the same in some areas, by how much should we be different? And we always remember the national culture role, the national culture role. Some cultures still today, women are not allowed to speak to men. How do you handle that? When you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, does it mean that you're not going to operate in that country? Of course, you're going to operate in the country. But if it's a country that women are not allowed to speak to men, or men are not allowed to speak to women that are not married to, then what do you do? And some countries will never allow, some countries' culture, a woman can't be the boss of a man. It's not possible. So what does that mean? You have to find a way to blend it. So multinationals face these challenges. And it's important, like you said, when you are transforming culture, you always have to consider the national culture. We say to organizations, when you want to change culture, focus on the outcomes. What do you want to achieve with culture change? Because that outcome that you want to achieve, it might be different. The approach might be different from country to country. Let's talk about the leadership's role in culture transformation and engaging employees in the journey. I'm going to have to put this directly. Leaders are typically the reason why culture transformation efforts fail. Somebody once told me, one of my lecturers told me when I was doing my MBA, that most of the time, the problem of an organization are the leadership. The leadership usually are the problem. And how many of us agree with that statement? I think it's a bit harsh on leadership, that the leadership often are the problem of the organization. What do you think? Please type in the chat box. I want to hear your reaction. If somebody tells you that the leadership tend to be the problem of the organization, yeah. A lot of times, yes, a lot of times. It takes a very, very, very humble, down-to-earth leader to accept that truth, that I might be the problem here. I might be the problem. I might be the problem. It takes a very humble leader to do that. And not many of them, not many people with that amount of power are able to accept that. That acceptance is the first step towards making culture change happen. Leaders, they may not know how they are impacting the culture. Like somebody typed here, they might not be walking the walk. Yeah. If you're going to transform culture, you must empower the leaders with the right knowledge, the right guidance, the right support, the right tools to make change happen. Yeah. Oftentimes leaders they don't walk the walk. I'm not saying that all leaders are useless. No, not that's what we're saying. We're saying that a lot of times the leaders are the reason why the culture hasn't changed. The leaders might also be well-intentioned, but the problem is they are not communicating that change by their actions. It doesn't mean that they are doing the wrong things. It's just that they're not doing the right things the way the right things should be done to communicate that change to their people. They're not walking the walk. John Maxwell said that everything falls on leadership, rises and falls on leadership. The buck stops with the leaders. Now, when we help organizations with culture change, we tell the leaders that, look, the truth is consultants can't know your business better than you. The leaders, even though they tend to be the biggest problem, so to say, they are still the most vital resource for making culture change happen. If the leaders change, if the leaders are united and consistent in the change, in the culture change, it will trickle down to everybody in the organization. We say that in organizations, leaders are like the parents in a household, and the staff, the workers, the employees are like children. The children do what they see the parents do. The problem is sometimes the parents may not do it in front of the children. I'll give you an example. Some parents pray, but they don't pray in front of the children. And I'm just using this generally. They pray, but they're prayerful, but they don't pray in front of the children. I don't know, maybe they don't have the time or whatever. If they don't pray in front of the children, how do you expect the children to learn how to pray? That's just a question on the side. It's what they see you do that they do. So you might be doing the right things, but you might not be doing it in front of your staff. Maybe because you don't have the time or whatever to do it. You need to find a way to get your staff to observe you and walk the talk, and see you walk the talk. So leadership input is important. I talked about conciliative change earlier. So these are four approaches towards culture change. I'm not going to take time with this because we don't have so much time, but you will get this and you can read it up. We normally recommend indoctrinative change. Indoctrinative change, there's corrosive change, hard leadership style, but the leadership expects people to take initiative to make culture change happen. When that happens, there's a lot of confusion, indecisiveness. Yeah, indecisiveness. I'm forcing you to change, but I'm expecting you to take the initiative to decide on what to change. that's going to be a problem. Conciliative change, the leadership is soft, they're not pressuring you, and they're telling you whenever you're ready to change, you change. And I was saying that oftentimes in multinationals, we tend to see an approach that is conciliative in nature. It tends to be wishy-washy, slow, and expensive. Aggressive change is very common. This is the 90-day turnaround. It's inflexible, authoritarian, radical. It usually works, particularly in Africa. But the problem with the aggressive change oftentimes is once that person who is pushing the change is taken out of the picture, that's the end. Indoctrinated change, it's with training. You're going to indoctrinate people into the change. But the challenge with indoctrinative change is that when you have indoctrinated everybody, groupthink starts to happen. So when somebody who is different comes in, diversity can be a problem. Yeah. Thank you very much for fun, Bernard. I see your contributions as well. Right. So when you're making change happen, think about the individuals to be changed. Know what needs to be changed. Don't make change blindly. Know the kind of changes to make. How do you monitor the change and evaluate the change? How do you monitor and evaluate the change? How do you motivate people? How do you communicate the change? Who are your change agents? What about trust in the organization? Do you have the willingness to change? Do you have psychological safety? All of these factors are things to consider during cultural change. And leaders have to make sure that they put procedures in place to make these things available. Guess what? The average manager spends about 80,000 hours in their career. 80,000 hours, how to calculate it? 40 hours a week, and they spend roughly about 50 weeks a year, and they spend like roughly 40 years in their career. So if you multiply that, comes down to about 80,000 hours. Average manager spends in their career. Some more, some less. But guess what? The average manager spends less than 200 of those 80,000 hours. Less than 200 face-to-face, one-on-one with their subordinates. Less than 200. So how do you bridge the gap? You lead by example. You lead by example. Consistent behavior. You must exemplify the culture change that you want to see. So leaders play a huge role in making this happen. So leaders are an instrument of change. This is the ProSci. I'm a certified ProSci change manager. ProSci is one of the ProSci as an organization. They don't look at culture change only. They look at change generally. And in ProSci, leadership and sponsorship is one of the three elements for change to happen. Leadership, change management, project management. Add those three together and your change happens. Yeah. So leadership, they play a crucial role. They are the ones that will ensure that culture change happens. And we have to ensure that leaders are committed. They buy into the change. If they don't buy into the change, change will not happen. Oftentimes we see the board of directors pushing for change, but the leaders have not bought into it. And we say, get your leaders on board or find leaders who are ready to support the change. Otherwise, you forget about the change and you keep moving on. Right? What can leaders do? They should be tactical about change. Change is a strategic issue. It must align with strategy. They have to be good examples. They must be consistent. They need to channel the collective spirit in the team. It's not just me alone. Carry people along in the change. And then, like we said, always remember the national culture. You need to leverage the national culture. In a country like Nigeria that has high power distance, and those of us that remember our notes from Hofstede's courses, Hofstede's models in our HR certifications or MBA programs, remember power distance, individualism and collectivism. You should channel those things into making change happen. And then in terms of motivating your staff, leaders should be front and center, recognizing people, appreciating them, incentives, rewards, giving constructive feedback, making communication as open as necessary, giving clear goals and expectations, and don't forget WeFM. What's in it for me? Those are the ways leaders can help to drive culture change in the organization. All right, great. Now we've been talking about organizational culture. Now let's talk about the other level of culture, which is the national culture issue. Because we said that multinationals have that double whammy of organizational culture, dealing with the organizational culture, and still dealing with different national cultures. Let's talk about national culture a bit. I would like you to type in the chat box, which country are we talking about on the left-hand side, and which country are we talking about on the right-hand side? On the left-hand side, the country on the left-hand side, they are relaxed, friendly, spontaneous, uninhibited, emotional, and impulsive. Country on the left-hand side. Country on the right-hand side, Thank you very much, Angela. Talking about ADCA from ProSci. On the right-hand side, the people there, their culture, they're always in a hurry. They are always serious, reserved, restrained, composed, and methodical. Which country are we talking about on the left hand, and which country are we talking about on the right hand? Quickly type in the chat box. Which countries are we talking about? France on the left. Left Norway, left Nigeria. Nigeria is relaxed. Are we spontaneous? Are we uninhibited? Germany, left is China, Ghana, and Nigeria. Whites, oh my God, Udwak, are you sure about that? Udwak, I'm not going to accept that, please. Udwak, I'm sorry. Whites and blacks, I don't think so. So Black Americans, are they like Black Nigerians? I don't know about that. All right, let me answer the question for you. Which country? The Japanese say Latin America is relaxed, friendly, spontaneous, uninhibited. The Mexicans, on the other hand, they say that an American, the same American, is always in a hurry, serious, reserved, restrained, and composed and methodical. Interesting, isn't it? The Japanese describe the Americans quite differently from how the Mexicans describe the Americans. What is happening here? Why is this so? Please type in the chat box. Why did the Americans and the Japanese see, why did the Mexicans and the Japanese see the Americans differently? Why did the Mexicans and the Japanese see the Americans, the same American differently? Mexicans say Americans are always in a hurry. Japanese say Americans are relaxed. Why? Simple answer is culture is a relative issue. Culture is relative. The Mexican is seeing the American from their perspective, and the Japanese is seeing the American from that perspective. Somebody else's normal only gets meaning relative to your own normal. Just like you have this 9 and 6. Thank you very much, Nicole. Based on their perspectives. What is this on the floor? Is that a 6 or a 9? It depends on the perspective. This is a big problem. This is why Russia and Ukraine are fighting a war. Somebody says it's a 6, another person says it's a 9. And sometimes you say it's easy to distinguish. You can just take one side. And what about this? Is this 3 or 4? It's not easy. It's not easy to deal with perspective issues. Yeah. So it's not just enough for us to be culturally aware. So for cultural intelligence to happen, you need tools to teach you how to understand different cultures. Take a look at this picture. You see the rhinoceros. Inside the rhinoceros picture, what do you see? Every picture of the rhinoceros has a tusk in it. All of us, we have a filter. We have our own cultural glasses. And sometimes we're not even aware that we're seeing the world through our own lens. Yeah, we're seeing the world through our own lens. Cultural intelligence is really important because for most of us, we already come into this world programmed. Not into this world. We as adults, we are entering organizations programmed with our own sense of what is good and what is bad. Anything that resembles our own culture is normal and it's good. And what is different from the culture we're familiar with is abnormal and bad. And our childhood, our upbringing contributes to that. So in organizations, it's important to be diverse. Yes, it is. See, when you have a diverse team, they typically will outperform a homogeneous team if they are well managed. If they're not well managed, they will not perform exceptionally. If they're not well managed, they will not perform exceptionally. So diversity is only an advantage when you have cultural intelligence. When you have cultural intelligence in the organization. If you manage a diverse team well, they will outperform their homogeneous counterparts easily. Now, in terms of cultural intelligence, what are we saying? You need to be aware of cultural differences. You need to have understanding and tolerance based on that awareness to adapt to those other cultures very quickly and to leverage national culture for culture change. Now we talk about national culture. How do you leverage it? I'm not going to go into too much detail, but please, if you have the time, read this book, I hope you can see it very well. Hofstede's book on national cultures. This is a book I would strongly recommend for you if you have the book. It's called Cultures and Organizations. There are many other books, but this is Hofstede's book. I've talked about organizational cultures and national cultures as well. Hofstede has 6 dimensions: national culture, power distance, about hierarchy, egalitarian versus. Yes, how can we get the book? It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon. But if you like, and I think Latana, I think used to have it. I don't know if they still carry it, but you can check with Latana on Amazon. Otherwise, you can contact me, and then I can try and see if I can get our HQ to send it down next time somebody's coming around. And of course, there are also digital copies available online. That might even be cheaper. So power distance, individualism versus collectivism, which is groupthink, relationship to the group. To make it easy, in terms of power distance, Nigeria is a hierarchical society, high power distance. The UK is low power distance. Individualism versus collectivism, Nigeria is a collectivistic society where people. The UK is individualistic. They're on their own. Everybody likes to be on their own. Motivation towards achievement of success. We said that used to be called masculinity, but now we call it motivation towards achievement of success, between decisive and consensus-seeking societies. And then you have uncertainty avoidance, which has to do with your relationship to ambiguity. Right? And then you have long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, which has to do with your perspective towards time. Are you patient enough to wait for the outcomes, or do you want results immediately? And then there's indulgence versus restraint, how you deal with pleasure. Are you all work and no play, meaning just work? Work is life. Work makes you free. Or are you work hard, but when it is time to play hard? Of course, you know the one that Nigerians are. Work hard. Nigerians are some of the hardest working, if that's correct. Most industrious people, very hardworking. They say Nigeria scores second to Mexico in terms of the number of hours it works. Nigerians work hard, but when it is time to play, Nigerians play hard. We tend to play harder than anybody else. And our population explosion shows that to a large extent. This is from Hofstede's analysis in terms of, and I've compared 2 countries here, the US and Nigeria. Yeah. In terms of power distance, Nigeria is hierarchical. In terms of, this is Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Thank you, Richard. Professor Hofstede, of course, is our founder of our organization. So thank you, Richard. Power distance, you see, Nigeria high, United States low, and then individualism. Nigeria, with our latest results on research, Nigeria is the most collectivistic society in the world, most collectivist nation with the current data that we have. Nobody is more into in-groups than Nigeria. Nigerians love being a part of a group. And this doesn't mean that we are selfless. No, it just means that being identified as part of a group is important to us as Nigerians. And this is an area where you will struggle. If you have a multinational company from the US establishing in Nigeria, it's an area that they could possibly struggle. Yeah. So it affects so many things, including communication styles. It affects communication styles in the organization. We've just compared Nigeria and the US. By the time you now compare, you have a multinational in several countries. How is that going to work? You can see the challenge it portends. So what are we saying? You need to understand these differences, that a culture is different, a national culture, a society's culture is different from the society you're coming from. Doesn't make that culture bad. Simply because Nigerians will call everybody who is from their village my brother, doesn't mean that Nigerians are bad. No. Simply because the people from the UK will say, that's not my brother, that's my stepbrother. It doesn't make them bad. Yeah, it just makes them different. So essentially, we understand those differences, appreciate those differences, and begin to adapt to them. Our communication style will change based on our understanding of the culture of our counterparts. Let's talk about measuring culture. Let's talk about measuring culture. How do we measure and assess culture? So culture tends to be fuzzy, but there are tools to make culture measurable and manageable. Normally, we would recommend a standardized survey. We use a standardized survey in Host City Insights, in the culture factor Host City Insights. But the challenge with the standardized survey is that you might need to tailor it sometimes. Yeah. But then you have a tailored survey, but the challenge with the tailored survey, even though it's customized, is that it requires preparation, and then there is no database to refer it to. And of course, that lack of reference frame can create a challenge for you when you're comparing it. A lot of people have told me when we try to work for them that there is no way you can do culture analysis without interviews and focus groups and observations. And indeed, there are benefits to interviews and focus groups and qualitative methods of gathering data. Many benefits. That it gives you context, contextual information, it gives you depth, and the people also feel involved. But the challenge with interviews is bias. The interviewer has bias, the interviewee has bias, and then there's the time that you require to do interviews, to hold the interviews, to type the interviews, to edit it, to analyze it. And of course, when you want to start scaling, how do you scale? As part of that bias is something called negativity bias as well. People are more likely to talk about what is going wrong than what is happening well. This is from my doctorate research. From my doctorate research, I found that there are over 79 culture assessment models. Over 79. I think actually for organizational culture, 79. Sorry, 79 for organizational culture. For national culture and national and organizational culture, over 92. Several of them. Which ones are most popular? You might want to take a look at them. McKinsey's OHI is very popular. Human Synergistics as well. OCI is very, very popular as well, which is Quinn and Cameron's research. Trompenas also has his own research. Culture Amp, they do some analysis as well. MIT and Glassdoor, Great Place to Work, even though people look at Great Place to Work more like a culture audit. Great Place to Work, interestingly, they are our clients. Great Place to Work, they are, in our view, their work starts after hours, in the sense that they will tell you whether your culture transformation efforts are yielding fruit or not, and making people feel comfortable in the organization. And then, of course, we have our multi-focus model, MFM, which is based on Hofstede's research. We will send this across. These tools are particularly powerful. They have many, many uses. When we look at culture analysis from Hofstede Insights, from the culture factors we are known now, we look at culture from 6 dimensions: effectiveness, customer orientation, which is customer centricity, control, focus, approachability, management philosophy. On each of these dimensions, we measure the culture of an organization or a department on a scale of 0 to 100. And we help the organization to determine what their culture currently is and what their culture should be like. It's important to note that some of these dimensions relate to the organization as a whole. The even number dimensions 2, 4, and 6, it tells you what differentiates the organization from other organizations. And dimensions 1, 3, and 5 would help you differentiate each department. It's a 6-step process that we use. We define the organization's goals. We use a survey to measure, 25 minutes for each person to fill, and they can do it together at the same time, meaning that you can quickly get the results. And then we sit down with the leadership, and we help the leadership to determine what culture they need to implement their strategy. We compare that culture they need, which we call the optimal culture, versus the one we have measured. And then we give them recommendations to change. And of course, then the change can start happening. If you do this, and you do this well, you will be able to ensure that you have you're not flying blind. These are some of the examples of reports that we provide. I will, in addition to giving you the slides, I will give you sample reports. Somebody already talked about ADCA. ADCA is a system that we advise for implementing culture change. So you do an assessment, and then you can now, based on the outcomes of the assessment, we strongly recommend Precise ADCA as a method for implementing the culture change that Hofstede Insights culture factor has given you. The culture factor has given you. Yeah. So you need to understand the steps to take to accomplish your culture change goals, when it should be accomplished, who will be responsible, who will be accountable, resources that you will need, and how you will monitor and evaluate the change. Before I go any further, let me tell you that culture change is not cheap. It will cost you something. It will cost you a lot. Yeah, it's a momentous investment, but it's a worthwhile investment. And I'm not just talking about paying the consultants. It's going to cost you certain things within the organization, including but not limited to certain people leaving the organization, including certain people leaving the organization. Yeah, when you have your culture change levers, you should translate them into one or more goals, and then you derive initiatives from your goals, create everything into a project plan, and we'll send this across to you. You put together a project plan. I don't know if you've heard about what they call the RACI matrix. You take your culture change initiative and you now break it down into specific action steps. This is change management in detail, as you would say. You need to put it together into a project management sheet, just like you would do any change management project. Take that culture initiative and make it into practical terms like this, and then you can now begin to implement the change. Yeah. So what should leaders do in this process? They need to understand the national culture, determine the strategic culture, the culture that needs to change, that the culture needs to change into, leverage the national culture. And then you can now come up with a project plan, a very beautiful project plan like this. Yeah. Of course, it can be much more complex than this, but we want to recommend use the RACI matrix. Identify who's responsible for each action, who's accountable, who's to be consulted, who's to be informed. Break down the culture change into specific tasks, like updating the appraisal system or whatever it is. Break them into specific tasks and assign them to people in the organization. Yeah. Some key roles in culture change. The board should provide direction. The leadership team should be the ones actually implementing the change. Yeah, they should be the ones implementing the change. Please, when in multinationals, usually the board of directors will not go beyond just getting, or rather, let me say, should not go beyond just getting updates regularly. The board should not try to do the leadership's job, and vice versa. The leadership should not fold their hands and act like the board. They should be involved, the leadership, the executive team. The board, on the other hand, they should guide and demand from the leadership team periodic reports to see that they are implementing the change as necessary. Yeah. We also say, thank you very much, Dr. Ugu. He says the model enhanced is RACI, which is evaluated. Yes. So responsible, accountable, to be consulted and informed, and then, of course, who is evaluating. Culture change, there should be a culture change steering committee. 1 to 3 members of the board should be on that. And then, of course, with the leadership team members. And then on the management side, there should be the project owner, which usually should be the CEO. We insist usually that the CEO should be involved and should own the project, or the HR director or head of strategy. And then they should now appoint a change manager, culture change manager. And then, there's a change team, change agents. They meet monthly with the project team, with project team, and then the project team themselves, they meet weekly with the change agents to drive the change. The last but not the least area we will talk about is ethical considerations. Yeah, ethical considerations. I will have taken some contributions from you, but because of time, let me just talk straight about this. This is a saying. I pulled this out from my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, from studies, as you can see below. Cultural studies are not for the faint-hearted. Many intellectual and physical barriers, beliefs, taboos, stereotypes, arguments could constrain creation of knowledge in this field. It's a minefield sometimes to talk about cultural issues. For me, the most important things when it comes to cultural transformation, especially for multinationals, are issues around sustainability and ESG. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Issues around diversity and wokeness, which is becoming a big topic globally now. Toxic leadership, company technology use, and including intrusion of privacy. And then oftentimes you have some unrealistic conflicting goals. The truth is that some of these things are not at cross purposes with cultural transformation, But we have to say you must align your transformation with your strategic objectives as an organization. I'm going to touch on a bit of a salty topic, toxic leadership. I need to talk a bit about that because toxicity is something that some of us who are culture practitioners, we feel a bit sensitive about. Is an army drill sergeant toxic? I'll ask that question to everybody. Is an army drill sergeant toxic? You know the army drill sergeant that screams at you, you are a rotten maggot. Repeat after me, rotten maggot. David Okalumi says yes. I'm not talking about an army drill sergeant in the organization, an army drill sergeant in the army, drilling the soldiers. Is that toxic behavior? It's not toxic behavior. But if you bring that behavior into the organization and call your dispatch rider dirty, stinking maggot, that is a problem. Yeah. So we say that toxicity has to be defined in the context of the organization. In the context of the organization, contextualization is important. It's important. So before we generalize, let's understand the context. Let's understand the context. Sometimes an organization might need what some people will describe as toxic in order to survive. Do you agree with me or not? Please put that in the chat box. Sometimes we will need behavior that some people will describe as toxic to survive. When we're facing bankruptcy, please, you have to sit up. I will tell you to your face, look, if you are not ready to sit up here, go back to your mother's house. It's the truth. So let's be a little bit careful about this, indeed. Yeah. And I will just Margaret Thatcher approach, very true. Okay. So what about the future? And I'll do this very quickly so we can wrap up. Is this the future? Look at the statistics. Global talent deficit. 85.2 million workers by 2030. And they said that the skills shortage could cost $8.5 trillion of unrealized annual revenue world over. Interesting. Still talking about the workplace of the future and current issues that are scaring us about the future. Jobs are going online, jobs are going into the cloud. Our people will need to reskill. As from this year, executives, 3 years ago, they said as from this year, reskilling is going to be the most important thing. And then AI is here already. I mean, I demonstrated use of AI today in our session. It's here already. We now have robot colleagues working with us. Robot colleagues are working with us. So 15% of companies are fully remote already. Hybrid work, the current workforce, robots, machines, algorithms. A lot of people will prefer to work remotely than to get a promotion or a raise. They want to work remotely. You heard about the Great Resignation. You heard about it. You know, it's a culture issue. Remote working is a culture issue. It's in our dimensions. This is dimension 4 and dimension 3. Remote working. A lot of people are talking about it. It's important to people. And of course, COVID, no thanks to COVID, it has changed the way we work forever. It has changed the way we work forever. It has changed the way we work forever. So, but, you know, people will say, yeah, but this is the developing world. These statistics, they don't apply here. True, to some extent. But I will tell you as well that our developing world is leapfrogging. And many of these issues that are happening globally are already happening in Nigeria. Even this our beautiful country of Nigeria. We are seeing people demanding. And my staff recently came to me and said, okay, we want to work from home. I could not say no. So we have to work out something, you know, and don't mind me, I'm a bit old school. I like to see the people working for me in front of me. But they wanted to work from home and they're effective. So it's fine by me. The future of work, the workplace of the future, remote work, gig economy, the metaverse. If you know about the metaverse, please go and read about it, where we are able to create the virtual world and use technology to make the virtual world very real. Virtual teams already are in existence, and then AI is already here. How is this going to impact organizational culture? How is this going to impact organizational culture? We talked about skilling and reskilling, upskilling, digital dexterity. Our culture, organizational culture of the future has to be more digital. Organizational culture of the future has to give preference to digitalization. So let me just check my audio. Can you still hear me, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, please, Dr. Okay. We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. So in terms of the future, we have to focus on, and how do we incorporate these robots and AI into our culture? Yeah, because it's a different paradigm. How robots work is not how human beings work. They don't go on leave. They don't have days off. They don't need compassionate leave. Yeah. How do we, and when I talk about robots, don't think about a machine walking around. Even your computer and certain things that you use day to day, they're already here. Our culture, organizational culture of the future, has to put a lot of emphasis on the digital world. So digital transformation must be a key part of organizational transformation for the future. A lot of researchers have said that what we know as middle management today will change, that we're going to be demanding more from middle management. There's going to be a lot of ownership being cascaded. A lot of ownership being cascaded. So we're going to be demanding more. So the culture of the future, perhaps, again, this is based on research, perhaps we're going to be demanding middle managers to step up and count themselves in. We're talking about robot colleagues already. Digital nomads, I don't know if you've heard about that. Already, Portugal is issuing digital nomad visa. You can come to Portugal and settle in Portugal, provided you have a digital job that enables you to work remotely in another country. Portugal will happily bring you, because that way you'll be earning money from one country and paying taxes in theirs. Yeah. The hybrid, thank you very much, Oluwaseun. Botswana already has that as well. I think I'm hoping that Nigeria will do that, but I think we need power supply and fiber optic cables for internet before we start attracting digital nomads. But that's another story for another day. Shared staff loyalty, because talk about the gig economy. Yeah, your staff eventually will be working 3 jobs at the same time, not for the same employer, 3 different employers. Yeah, so there's going to be shared staff loyalty, very, very likely. That your employee, most people will sort of like be on short tenured contracts or defined work times, 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day they work for you. Yeah. So those things are things that we're looking at, that virtual space is going to be very, very real in a short space of time. And then work-life balance, people are wondering whether that will continue, because unfortunately, we have now realized that remote working from home is actually destroying work-life balance. So a lot of us are worried about the future of work-life balance, because if you work from home, you will know that sometimes up until 2 a.m. you're still working. Up until 2 a.m. you're still working. And then diversity, equity, and inclusion with the work that's going on, it's going to be emphasized. Personalization as well will be emphasized. People want a job to reflect their personality. And then there's going to be hopefully a stronger focus on well-being, because as this work-life balance issue comes out, people will now start choosing organizations or cultures that enable them to have a good work-life balance. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been such an amazing time with you, and I know that it's been quite long, but just before I go, just want to outline some points. We talked about what a multinational is. They have operations in more than one country. Talk about Hofstede's 2 models on culture: national culture, organizational culture, 6 dimensions in each case, different from each other. National culture, how we feel, our programming, how we feel. Organizational culture, especially in the multinational, regardless of where you are coming from, regardless of how you feel, this is how we do things here. You either adapt or you leave. Culture and strategy are inseparable. You cannot separate them. Culture will either eat that strategy or support that strategy. And then, of course, we talk about multinational culture organizations. When they start to implement culture, they have several challenges: blind effort, resistance that is complex, politics, communication, change fatigue, governance, localization. and we'll talk about the culture of the future, where robots are going to be our colleagues. I don't know if they will be collecting salary and leave allowance and bonus as well. Who knows? That's the whole idea, because we're afraid that maybe they will start programming us as the robots. If you doubt me, go and watch The Matrix. That's what some of us are scared about. We don't know whether the robots will now be the boss, your appraisal system, your appraisal way. So you say we don't get light. Well, you know that robots inverter, they can use solar. They can use solar to work. They can use solar to work. They can even use you. The robots can be producing human beings and be using the human beings' energy to work. That is The Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, it's such a pleasure to be here. I really, really appreciate talking to everybody. I think there are some questions, and I would look forward to answering your questions right away. Please help me out. And when you do this, I'm going to put up the Mentimeter again, and I would like you to please share what you have learned so that I can compile it and share with everybody. So the floor is open for questions. I'm going to open the Mentimeter for us to share our key learnings. Yeah, I will put that up so we can be sharing our key learnings, and I will download all of that and share them with the slides by the end of our session today. So I'll open the Mentimeter. The Mentimeter will be open. Please share your takeaways. And while you're doing that, let's open the floor for questions. Dr. Ogu, back to you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Okay. Dear colleagues, this has been a power-packed 2 hours. I don't know if you got value, but I got so much value. And guys, this is not an advertisement. Dr. Okay is one of the thought leaders in the area of organizational culture transformation on the African continent, the Middle East, and Asia. All right, so that we have gotten this value in 2 hours. I mean, it's been great, Dr. Okay. Thank you so much. And Dr. Okay, I'd like to commit you, openly before our members. We would like to have you come take this as a physical paid session for those who might be interested. For those of us who require ethics recertification units, particularly for your HRCI, we would like to bring Dr. Okay back to come and drill down on this subject, particularly on the ethical and corporate governance side. You agree with me that there are ethical issues, corporate governance issues in corporate culture. It's just that some of us are not bold enough or courageous enough to talk about them in our organization. So Dr. Okay, I don't know if you mind, we'd like to commit you. I'll personally get in touch with you so that we can fine-tune all the details. But if you hold a HRCI credential here, it's important that you key into the ethics masterclass. Now, if we have questions, let's ask them right away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Ogu. Happy to help. Of course, we'll talk about putting that together, the paid session. And I think we will also work out something with AEHRP to see how we can subsidize our certification in organizational culture for your members. We will work out a particular deal for you, so we'll be happy to look at that. That will help to do that. So we're happy to do that.
Thank you so much, Doc. So, dear colleagues, if we have questions, please let's ask. We all know that this topic, we cannot really exhaust everything in 2 hours, but I got value. I don't know about you. So let's ask our questions. If you want to use the chat box, please use the chat box. So Dr. Okay, there's a question here from Ronke Patrick. It says, you said culture cannot, Ronke, I'm finding it difficult to understand your question. Ronke, can you just unmute your mic and just ask Dr. Okay directly? Ronke, are you there? You said culture can't be individual, must be shared. Now I grew up with no Christmas trees, and now I set up that tree in my home for my children. What do I call that? Okay, Dr. Okay, I don't know if you understand the question.
I think I do. So she's saying she has learned she has learned something, and she's looking at that Christmas tree as culture. Yes, indeed, the Christmas tree, setting up the Christmas tree. If you remember, and let me try and see, this is still open, the Mentimeter. Please feel free to share your key learnings so that we can compile it and share with everybody. But while it is still open and you can go there, I want to just quickly share my slide where I talked about, culture can't be shared. I mean, that it can't be an individual's thing. So I talked about this. Sorry, I don't think that's open yet. That culture is something that you hold, you share with other people. It's not something that belongs to you alone. So you learned that Christmas tree somewhere. Ronke, you learned that Christmas tree. Somebody taught you about that Christmas tree. Most likely your friends, maybe people in your organization or people that you went to school with, or perhaps you lived in another country and then you learned about the Christmas tree, or your children foisted it on you. Your children learned it from somewhere and taught you. I don't know, but somehow you learned about it. You learned about it. So yes, we are all programmed in a particular way, but then as we grow older, we begin to learn things and we share with others as well. So it's important to understand when we say that culture is a shared phenomenon. Culture is a shared phenomenon. That Christmas tree, some people do it. A group does it, and you learned it from that group. You learned it from that group. So it's not you alone that knows how to do it. You learned from a group. Just like Nigeria, for instance, there are many things that we do in Nigeria now that we learned. Baby showers and gender reveal parties and all of these things. And I know I'm talking about some sensitive issues here, but we learned it from somewhere. Even spraying money, we learned spraying money from somewhere, because we didn't have paper notes 200 years ago in Nigeria. We had manilas and we had cowries. So I don't know if we were spraying them at that time. Yes, you can learn. You can learn from other cultures. They call it acculturation. You can learn from other cultures. So you, Ronke, doing that thing with the Christmas tree, you're not the only one doing it. You learned it from someone or some group. So you're sharing that culture with the group. And then you and your children are sharing that as well. So you're sharing it with some people and you're sharing it with others. But it's different from your personality. Your personality, with personality, those of us who are familiar with the ocean model of a personality. Ocean is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion versus introversion, aggressiveness, and then also neuroticism. So those 5 personality traits, they are yours, and you hold on to them or you manifest them based on your natural inclinations and what you have also learned. Ronke, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, Dr. Okeshi has responded in the chat box. Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please, let's ask Dr. Oke question. So, Dr. Oke, mine is just more of a concern, and I don't know if you would like to speak to it. Most often times we often then tend to also downplay the fact that to a large extent, power resides in multiple centers in the organization. And most often times, some of us tend to ignore the fact that some people may not hold a formal title or position, but they wield power when it comes to culture change. What are your thoughts around that? And what would you advise someone who is driving a culture change to navigate those multiple power centers? That's just my concern, really.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael. Those informal leaders, if I will refer to them as that, popular people in the organization, you have to involve them in the culture change. You have to involve them in the culture transformation. Otherwise, they can work against you massively. They can work against you massively during culture change. What we normally recommend is that you should make them culture champions. Human beings, one of the things that we appreciate a lot as human beings is power. Human beings love the fact that they are recognized. It's not general, but it's almost general. Most human beings like to be recognized as someone of influence. When you identify these people, bring them into the inner circle of the change. Yeah, they may not be the ones determining what to change, but they could contribute to implementing that change. You need to make them feel that their opinion has been taken into consideration, that you have listened to them and you are involving them in the change. So you want to tap into those people to make sure that they support the change efforts. Otherwise, they will work against you. Again, I would, in my slide, there was a slide I talked about Nigeria being collectivist and currently being the most collectivist country in the world. In fact, I think I can actually just show my slide, and I will also give you a link for which you can take a look, since we're talking about multinationals here, a link with which you can take a look at the comparison of about 100 countries in the world, comparison of their cultures. I've just put the link in there. So I'm going to share my screen. So if we take Nigeria and we take another country called Netherlands, where Unilever and other companies from Netherlands again, Heineken, Nigerian breweries. Nigerian breweries is from Netherlands, and Unilever is also a Dutch company or Dutch English company. So Nigeria and Netherlands. So take a look at us. You can see the difference between us, Nigeria, and Nigeria is in green, Netherlands is in orange. Yeah? Netherlands is the most individualistic country in the world. Nigeria is the most collectivist country in the world. What does this mean? In Nigeria, people are concerned about the opinion of the people that they value. They are concerned significantly about it. So in other words, when we see other people doing it in Nigeria, we also want to do it. And that's the reason why your daughter's wedding will be like the other person's daughter's wedding. Even if you're a quiet person, you will not do your daughter's wedding the way you want to do it. You will do it the way society tells you to do it. I'm telling you, it sounds funny, but it's very true. So very true, copycat syndrome. So we can tap into that in culture change. In Nigeria, we can tap into that. Let's identify influencers in the organization. And then when those influencers start doing things in the organization, the things that we want to see in our culture change, others will go ahead. So feel free to play around with this model. You just go there, you type. There are some countries that are not there because we didn't put all 220 countries or so, but we only have 100 of those countries there. And some of them are African nations. So you have Nigeria, you have Ghana. It's interesting, our latest studies on Nigeria, our score on individualism used to be around 30 before, but the latest results from our studies over the last 10 years shows that Nigeria has become more collectivist, less individualistic. Please note that individualism doesn't mean selfishness. They are two different things. Selfishness manifests itself both in individualistic and collectivist cultures. In a collectivist culture, the selfish persons will persuade others to do what they want. I'll say that again. So in a collectivist culture like Nigeria, selfishness still happens. And how it happens is that the selfish person will persuade the group to do something that will favor them. And they will find it easier to do. If you doubt me, go and ask our politicians. They understand this very well. They understand hierarchy, power distance, and they understand collectivism very, very well, our politicians. They know it better than even those of us that have a degree on culture. They know how to manipulate national culture to get results that they want. Yeah. So yeah, so that's my answer, Dr. Ogun. Those people who are informal leaders in the organization, involve them, make them prominent so that they can influence others in the same direction that you want the culture change to go.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Okay. It's been an amazing evening with you. We thank you so much for your valuable time. Let me just check if there's any other. Okay, there is no other comment in the chat box. So I'd like to